And welcome to the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports Podcast, a podcast where I, Richard Harris, talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s over today. Today's topic is delusional athletes and why I prefer the athletes of the 80s and 90s over today. Yesterday, Jonathan Taylor and the Colts decided that the Colts would give him an opportunity to seek a trade in the NFL. Whenever any team in the NFL tells you they're allowing you to seek a trade in the NFL, that is their way of saying, just get out of my office, leave me alone, give me some time to think about you, which I'm not going to do. And any trade you think of, we're not going to really accept because you're not a general manager, you don't have the expertise, and you think your value is more than what it is. And the reality is, your value to you might be Hall of Fame status, best player in the world, best player ever to play. But your team and other teams in the league think of you simply as whatever your name is. And so this era of sports, the last couple of years, there's been this big empowerment movement going on in sports where young black men are, and mostly it's young black men, feel, firstly, that they're not slaves, that they're not at the behest of team owners and leagues. They are individual property, they're individual people, individual products, and you are not going to define or tell them what to do like it was in the day, in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and 90s, and the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, athletes were told what to do, they did it, and so on and so forth. I never heard Michael Jordan complain about anything until the end of his career when the idiot owner, Jerry Krause, was like, we want to move on from this era. And they tried to move on from the era, and they haven't done anything. They've won anything since. But we'll get to why I prefer the 80s and 90s over today on that vein. The reason why I prefer the 80s and 90s or the mentality of today is the athlete in the 80s and 90s did something of value that made them valuable. Jonathan Taylor might be a great running back, may have led the league in rushing, may have set a standard of running back for the Colts that are hard to duplicate. But the Colts are an organization that has had this issue before. Eric Dickerson had issues with the Colts. Marshall Faulk had issue with the Colts. Jeff George, professional athletes today are nowhere different or nowhere new to what it was back in the day. Everyone wants more money. But the difference between some of those guys and the athletes today is that their impact is different than they think it truly is. For example, if Derrick Henry was the person who was holding out, wanting more money, so on and so forth, you have to give him what he wants because his impact is felt league-wide. He has played in the biggest stages, except for the Super Bowl, but he has led his team to the biggest wins and stages more so than any running back in the league. You could say the Giants don't win without Saquon. You could say the Steelers weren't as good without Le'Veon Bell, but their impact wasn't felt league-wide. Like somebody like Adrian Peterson, for example. Barry Sanders is a great example. Barry Sanders was a league MVP, ran for 2,000 yards in a season, was the dude. Everyone in the league feared Barry Sanders, felt his impact, and therefore, if he demanded money, he would get it because he was that dude. Emmitt Smith was that dude. And Emmitt Smith held out and showed the Cowboys, I'm that dude. Because look at your first two games. Look at Michael Irvin putting a helmet through a wall in frustration because we keep losing. I am the straw that stirs this team's drink. I'm the player in the Super Bowls when we were struggling against Buffalo in the second one in particular. I turned the game around. And you can't dispute that. But what has Jonathan Taylor done? What has Josh Jacobs truly done? What has Saquon Barkley truly done? They're good backs, but they're not backs to the point where everyone in the league is like, this Sunday we got to stop Saquon in order to keep the Giants out of the Super Bowl, keep the Giants out of the playoffs. Like, we know that the Tennessee Titans are going to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry 30 to 40 times down your throat and is a central cog to beating your team. We've seen it done. We've seen him run all over Buffalo, run all over Kansas City in big games. Seen him run all over Baltimore. We ain't seen those other guys do that. We haven't seen the Colts need a victory today and they give the ball to Jonathan Taylor and he runs for 170 yards and 3 touchdowns to clinch the division in the playoffs, in the divisional round, in the wild card round, in the championship game. We haven't seen Saquon Barkley. We haven't seen Josh Jacobs. Now you say, well, it's not their fault their team don't get to those points. That's the point. That's what teams are saying. That's what ownership are saying to these players. Y'all ain't taking us nowhere. Eric Dickerson had great numbers as a running back in the National Football League. Still holds the NFL season record for most yards in a season as a rusher. Did it translate to a Super Bowl championship? Did it translate to what? He had all those numbers, and then they played the 85 Bears in that championship game in the snow, and he was just average. He was nothing. But because he set that National Rushing League running record, he definitely qualified to get paid by somebody. And he led his team to the NFC Championship game with Dieter Brock as a quarterback. Saquon isn't leading the Giants to no championship game. Josh Jacobs not leading no team to no championship game. And that's what the league is saying. That the dudes of the past did it and earned the right to be paid that way. Plus, the league, I'll even give you a current example. Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley at least helped lead the Rams to the Super Bowl. So the Rams were like, yo, we can't win the Super Bowl without Todd Gurley being Todd Gurley. And so they paid him. Unfortunately, Todd Gurley's knees didn't help out, so then they paid him and then they got rid of him. Ezekiel Elliott, clearly one of the best running backs during his time when he was younger and healthy. The Cowboys were like debating every year to pay him because the Cowboys felt we don't win with Ezekiel Elliott. We win with Dak Prescott. And so they gave Dak Prescott the $40 million a year. And now Ezekiel Elliott's a Patriot. In the 80s and 90s, they ain't throw away what they felt was the reason they won. The Lions knew that even with Scott Mitchell and Herman Moore and all these great receivers they had, Johnny Morton, the straw that stirred that drink was Barry Sanders, was Emmitt Smith, was Walter Payton. The Giants never had issues with running backs because Joe Morris gave them a championship. Otis Anderson wasn't the highest paid running back. Rodney Hampton never demanded money. Tiki could have demanded money. He helped the Giants get to a Super Bowl. The running backs always knew their place. This is a quarterback league, and you're just a cog. You're not going to get $20 million a year. You're going to get $10 million, $15 million, and deal with it. And Taylor feels that he'll go to another team, and that other team is going to give him a long-term deal. And even if he gets that, even if he gets traded to a team that needs a running back, they're going to put him through hell to get that long-term deal. Because he's not Derrick Henry. And it's the same thing they're doing in the NBA. The players believe that they rule the league, that they control the flow, they make the money for the owners, and it's true, they do. But what the players in the NBA don't understand is that no matter how good you are, if you don't fit in with a team that you think you want to go to, and you don't do anything, then you're just a guy. James Harden, probably, I don't disagree. Charles Barkley says he is the most difficult one-on-one guy to guard in the history of the NBA. Nobody can stay in front of him. But his style doesn't match with any team unless he is the only guy. He has not figured out in all his years in the league how to play with somebody to win a championship with all of his talent. And that's why I say they're delusional. They're delusional because they think that it's about them. It's not about them. In basketball, it's about fit and team. Joel Embiid should be a championship player. Nobody in the league can physically guard him at 7'3", but Joel Embiid allows people to guard him because he wants to shoot threes, he wants to dribble, he wants to show he has versatility instead of showing that he has intelligence. Because if he had intelligence, he would have games like he had a few years ago against the Clippers where he dropped 43, or the game he had against Denver this year where he was literally unguardable. But he feels that he wants to show he has all the game. Nobody cares if you have all the game. Which is my entire point of all the reasons why I like the 80s and 90s over today. Today is not about winning. Today is about me, my platforms, my salary, my usage. I'm not a slave. How about just win? Nobody's telling you to shut up and play. How about just win? When you win, you don't got to say anything because everything is said for you. Tom Brady never says he's the GOAT. Everyone else does. Michael Jordan never says he's the GOAT. Everybody else does. He doesn't have GOAT sounds playing in the locker room. He doesn't pretend to put a crown on his head. He lets me do it. He lets you do it. Tom Brady lets you do it. Mike Trout let you do it. But the players today don't get it. They're delusional. And that's why I prefer the 80s and 90s sports over today. Because the delusionality of today is insane. Think about Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson was extraordinary. He put people in the seats to watch him play. I don't think people are going to a Raiders game to see Josh Jacobs play. Jonathan Taylor play in Indy. Think. Not about you all the time. About Richard Harris.